Welcome to episode 4 of The Real Public Servants. I am Angelique Crumbly.
And I'm Angela McNerney. Welcome back.
Welcome back. And in this episode, we'll talk about the differences, challenges, and authorities of civil service employees versus political appointees. And so we're going to start a little bit with our experiences. I have been a civil servant, I have been a senior executive, and I have been a political appointee. And so I do have perspectives on all of them. Angela, what about you?
Yeah, so I've been a civil servant as well, and as a career senior executive as well.
So, when we talk about the differences between politicals and career employees, and this is interesting coming on the heels of our deep state
hmm
conversation because we talked a lot about the administration versus what the bureaucracy does. And when we talk about the administration, we're actually talking about political appointees. And when you're talking about the bureaucracy, you're talking about the career civil servants or foreign service or others that serve in the overall bureaucracy writ large. I think we wanted to talk and maybe do it in the same way we did the deep state and kind of discuss some of the questions that we
hmm
see or we're getting about what's the difference between a political appointee and a career public servant. How long do they serve? And so, Angela, I don't know if you want to start us out
Yeah,
with, discussions relating to the Plum Book, and I
yeah,
can kind of
yeah,
take what's the difference between career and political and timing and stuff like
yeah.
that. And then we can talk about Schedule F, which is
Right.
also something that's on the horizon. So over to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks so much. So, the first thing we need to look at when we're looking at political positions versus career federal employees is how do these get designated? So, inside the government and outside too, there's this thing called the Plum Book. And this Plum Book, its formal name is the United States Government Policy and Supporting Positions. It's a publication. Congress releases every 4 years after a presidential election. So this book designates for all federal agencies, not just CFO Act agencies, but for all federal agencies, those positions that are I would say, let me say, set aside for political or accepted types of positions, as we call them. So right now, and we'll put this link in our resources for you. But the Plum Book currently has over 9,000 positions listed for this administration. As of June of 2025, about 6,800 of those positions were filled. And of those positions, about 3,300 are considered career senior executives because senior executives of the government are, even though they're career appointed, they can at times be filled by a political appointment. Okay. So this Plum Book lists all of these positions and their designation. It talks about their term. It says if you go there now, you will be able to see who's filling these 6,000 positions across the Trump administration. You will be able to see their pay plan, and you will be able to see the title that they're holding at each of these agencies. So that's the designation process, and these positions, these number of positions, it ebbs and flows, right? As agencies provide their designations and certify them to the Office of Personnel Management, and then that congressional report that gets filed every 4 years. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this designation of where do you find this. So if you're interested in finding out where all these positions are, so in the Plum Book.
All right. And so one of the questions that we've seen is who appoints these political appointees, how long are they employed by the federal government, and who can fire them. And I think kind of a good thing to do is talk about The feature of the designation, meaning, how are they selected, what's the role, what's the tenure, what's their continuity, and look at it from a civil service perspective and then from a political appointee perspective. But just a quick definition: civil servants are career employees hired based on merit and are nonpartisan. And I want to say that again:
Yes.
nonpartisan, while political appointees are chosen for their political affiliation and serve at the pleasure of the president, often filling top leadership roles. And depending on the administration, you will find political appointees can go all the way down into the bureaucracy
Hmm.
or stay
Hmm.
at a higher level. The main difference between civil servants and political appointees lie in those features: the role, the tenure, the selections. Civil service have job security, unless Schedule F comes along, and we'll talk about that. And
Yeah. Right.
that will change that job security feature. And they have expertise in their field, whereas political appointees have shorter tenures and are responsible for aligning agency policy with the current administration's goals. Okay. And I think the key there is that you're looking at the politicals to ensure policy, and you're looking to the career civil servants to tell you the best way to implement and
Right.
execute that policy.
Hmm.
So, in terms of looking at the features, civil servants are hired through a competitive, merit based process that may involve examinations. So, some people take tests, written tests, other things. You can take, when you start in the civil service, there was a test. I think I took it like straight out of college to get
Right.
into
Yep.
the civil service. Political appointees, however, are in many cases nominated by the president, particularly if you are presidentially appointed with Senate confirmation. Okay, and so they require that Senate confirmation, and so they're called PASs. You'll hear that as the shorthand term of presidential appointed with Senate confirmation. Or they're simply presidential employee appointees, whereas they're called PAs, and they are those individuals that are appointed by the president, and they list it on the White House website, and they announce it formally. And then there's another type of political appointee, which is Schedule C, you'll hear in many cases,
Hmm.
or
Accepted.
they're administratively determined, or other terms. And these are political appointees that you will see at the less high level, shall we say, of the PAS ranking. And those are just straight, without the announcement, positions that people are placed in. And usually every agency has a White House liaison that works with the White House in the Office of Presidential Personnel. They call it PPO, that help fill those jobs. And as Angela noted, there are thousands of them. Now,
Right.
in terms of the role, civil servants carry out the duties and to fulfill agency objectives, often with, again, program and other technical and some policy expertise. Political appointees, in terms of their role, set policy and directives and are responsible for steering the agency's direction. In terms of tenure, civil servants have job security and long-term careers serving under many administrations. I think, Angela, we talked about serving under what, 8 presidents
Yeah.
over the
Yep.
course of our careers.
Hmm.
Whereas political appointees serve at the discretion of the president and may, in many cases, leave when a new administration takes office. Right.
Right. Right.
There is something known as burrowing, where
Hmm.
some
Yep.
political appointees will, take career jobs. And so at certain times in the cycle, like a year out from the end of an administration, OPM looks at people going, particularly for what we call the general schedule, GS 15s and 14s and 13s. They look to see if there are, and even in some cases, SESs, if there is burrowing of politicals to stay,
Hmm.
longer.
Right.
Um,
And Angela, just to bring that back to our previous
sure.
episode of deep state, I think a lot, when people think of borrowing and why the rules came about, it's because I think in some respects they didn't want to have an embedded deep state, right? In the
Correct.
prior From the prior administration, right? Already
Mm-hmm.
baked in
Mm-hmm.
to the next administration. So
Exactly.
it
No,
just
that's a
brings that to
very,
mind
very
about the
good
deep
point.
state. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then in terms of continuity, the civil service provides stability and institutional knowledge through the changing administrations. Political appointees bring in the new ideas and perspectives, but, again, shorter tenure can mean in many cases a steeper learning curve, sorry. And that too goes back to the deep state. If you don't
Right.
understand how the bureaucracy works, you can perceive that the bureaucracy is working against you. So just
Yep.
something to keep into consideration there.
Hmm.
So for the most part, those are the key roles, or features of each of the civil service and political appointee arenas. In terms of, I think the next big thing, we wanted to talk a little bit about Schedule F because it
Hmm.
is, in essence, what I believe in the first Trump administration, it was put forth, and then the Biden
Hmm.
administration came in and
Rescinded it.
actually
Yeah.
rolled it back and rescinded it. And
Hmm.
now it is moving forward again. And what
Right.
Schedule F is, and I don't know, Angela, has the executive order on Schedule F rolled back out in this administration? I didn't
I
get a chance to
don't
check.
think it is in full force,
Okay.
but definitely something to watch.
Okay.
Just because I haven't seen a lot of um, positions listed, sort of as these at will. So
Okay.
you're going to talk a little bit about what these, what is it? What is Schedule F?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that they are well on their way
Mm-hmm.
because of the targeted nature of the rifts and firings that have
Mm-hmm.
occurred,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
So if we're doing the rifts and firing, part of it is to look at bringing in Schedule F. And so, what is Schedule F? And I think we can take it from, the original EO kind of lays out what the purpose is, the implementation and impact. So, the executive order that created Schedule F, wanted to create a new category of federal employees, which would be exempt from many of the protections afforded to traditional civil service employees. The order required federal agencies to submit lists of positions that could be
mhm,
reclassified under Schedule F by, in the first term, it was January 2021, I think, January 9th.
mm,
So it was literally at the end of the first Trump administration. And it was the day before the inauguration, actually. But most of the positions focused on policy and budgetary positions. And one thing I can say is prior to my retirement in May, they were designating those positions again. And
right,
since I worked in the budget shop, all of the senior positions were seen as those Schedule F type um, positions. So, what does it mean in terms of impact? Well, Schedule F employees could be more easily removed or transferred based on their policy views or perceived lack of loyalty to the administration. And I think there were some questions around that, like, okay, if that's the case, how is loyalty determined and
right.
by whom?
Hmm.
And then is retaliation something? And
Hmm.
is this something where, manipulation and, all sorts of things can become the case? And I think, again, maybe that's part of the reason why we have not seen it rolled out, much stronger in this administration, is because there are these questions around, okay, well, how do you implement that and what does it mean? And, again, litigation,
Yeah.
we could see some litigation around this. So I think the really big question is okay, if you're going to make them at will employees, and if you
Hmm.
want this determination of loyalty, what does that mean for the career civil service, right?
Right.
And then
Right.
how are you hiring people in?
Hmm.
And is there going to be a loyalty test? How is that determined? And I think what's really, really important is to go back to, when I was laying out the civil service or career versus political, that nonpartisan thing I think is really
Right.
key, because you
Hmm.
really need to have a cadre of individuals working for the government that are objective, but are there, that have the expertise and the knowledge to keep things going.
Right.
One
Right.
beautiful thing about the bureaucracy is one person don't stop the show, because the
Right.
bureaucracy is built
Hmm.
that way so that it
Yeah.
doesn't. And I
Yeah.
think that's the
Yeah.
best way to
Yeah.
serve the American public, is to have that expertise in, that you can keep
Right.
regardless of
Yeah, I mean,
administration.
I think the continuity,
Exactly.
we have seen some very chaotic even transitions that have occurred during our 30 some years. And if you didn't have those career civil servants, and let's just say there was a major event like a 9/11 that would have occurred
Hmm.
during this chaotic time, which to me is what I think is that when you have so many at will and they are let's just say that they're terminated at the end of an administration. If you have like budget and all of these folks that basically are gone, and let's just say I think it took and let's just say it's 113 days on average to bring on a presidential appointed Senate confirmation, right,
Hmm.
and head of an agency, right? You can imagine that, like, you have years of these vacancies, and if you look at the plum book you'll see this even now, where you have thousands of these positions that are vacant. And that, to me, it's inefficient, right? And it's not serving the American people. Um, so this there's a question too about at will employees, or let's just call these loyalty employees. Um, that Do they perform any better than the career civil servants, right?
Right.
There really hasn't been, as far as I could tell in my very limited research I did, there hasn't really been enough research on this. And there are state governments out there in the U.S. who have all at will. All of the employees for the state governments are at will, but again, there's no link between better performance and appointing those loyal to me.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I think it's definitely something to think about
Hmm.
in serving the American public.
Correct. And again, I think your major point there about the turnover. So if, for example, we know, the Trump administration is a one-term administration, right? So then there'll be the next administration, and
Right.
those people are going to want to bring their people in. So if you're going down into the bureaucracy and
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
making all of those changes, it to be quite frankly, to me,
Right.
that's just not helpful, and it will be consistent churn. And again, why is the government here? To serve the
Right.
American people. And so you want the best, right, to
Right.
serve the American people, and you want a consistency. And so I think that it is really, really kind of important to look at the Schedule F,
Hmm.
and that people should know about it, so you can ask your representatives and
Right.
others,
Hmm.
does this make sense? What are we doing in the executive branch? We want to make sure that we have objective people and that we keep experts in positions. So, for example, if another COVID happens, right,
Hmm.
you want to make sure that your health professionals are able to step up and do the needful. And again, that's in the career positions.
Right.
So
Right.
that's where that long-term expertise resides. So I think it's really, really kind of critical about that, to support, again, the consistency.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned the deep state again,
Mm,
Angela. A
mhm.
lot of times, and weigh in here on the deep state, there's the political versus the bureaucrat. And then
Yep.
the question, the career person, right? The question is it the political who's really the deep state, or
Right.
is it
That's right.
the bureaucrat that's really the
Right.
deep state, or the career
Right.
person? And, I just wanted to kind of get your
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that, in our previous episode, right, there was the question about, what are the means and the methods by which a career federal employee can raise their concern or a dissent, right? We said in some cases you can dissent from a policy decision. And what's interesting, in our 30 some years, I know, as we progressed up through the ranks, right? When we were working directly for a presidential appointee, and in this case, full disclosure, I did work for Angelique, and she was a presidential appointee. I was
Mhm.
a career, right, a career senior executive, and then a career general schedule civil servant. Um, so what's interesting is the what we saw sometimes, and maybe even in the first Trump administration and in the others, but the political appointees who disagreed or were dissenting from perhaps um, a national security memorandum of directive. Let me just say that. Um, and I think personally, I saw much more of that
Mhm. Mhm.
amongst
The
the
politicals.
politicals,
Mhm.
and I I saw that much more than any sort of hidden network inside the bureaucracy.
Mhm.
And basically, we would sit outside the door and we'd be like, okay, y'all come on out now when you when y'all know what you're doing, and who's going to call
Exactly.
over to the White House, right?
Exactly.
But
Exactly. And
yeah,
it would be interesting to watch the politicals going around the administration position. And we were in the foreign assistance realm, and
yeah,
so we saw that. And what I will say personally, having served in one administration as a presidential appointee, and then so we'll say the end of the Obama administration, and then serving for 3 years acting in a political position in the first Trump administration, I was able to see kind of both sides of working for two different administrations. And then I reverted back to career civil service. um what I would say is that it really weren't that different. And I will say, moving from a career civil servant into a political position and then back to career, you were never truly part of the politicals. Like,
mhm,
even the politicals knew that
yeah,
you were truly a career person, and there was a difference, right? And so,
mhm,
at least from my perspective. And so, that difference was primarily that, they knew when the administration was over, they would be gone and you would still be there. And
right,
so, some people, particularly at the end of the Obama administration, were like, how did you do that? Because we'd like to stay forever, right? And what you would find is some of them kind of didn't get the bureaucracy and how it worked and how all the rules worked. But then, and again, coming into, acting for 3 years in the Trump administration and watching, some of the things you said, it was just very interesting,
mhm,
to kind of watch that dynamic between the politicals and the career, and to
mhm,
really see, again, a push pull in some respects
mhm, yeah,
among the politicals, less so among the bureaucrats and the politicals, or the
right,
career and the
yeah,
politicals.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it was uh interesting to watch.
It was. It was.
Yeah, them develop policies or to try to stall policies,
Yes.
which they um, some of them did. Some of them did.
Some
I think
of
one
them
of the
did.
thing maybe we could talk about is sort of the performance of an appointee versus the performance of the
Mm-hmm.
career federal servant. I think both of us
Mm-hmm.
had we supervised both career and political appointees at some time. And as much as you want to put them on a performance plan, and you want to measure everything that they do just like you do and you have to do for careers,
Hmm.
that didn't matter.
No,
Honestly,
not at all.
it didn't
It
matter.
didn't.
No,
It didn't.
you
I
could give them
agree.
a big fat zero
And it didn't matter.
and they'd still be there. And not that I had any that were, like that,
Hmm.
it there's you mentioned tension amongst themselves and sometimes tension with career, but there was certainly tension between a non-performing appointee and the career,
Yes.
when we all knew it, right?
Hmm.
So that that creates some tension, because it creates these a system that's only applied, right, partially to a group
Correct.
of workers.
Correct.
And so, that's just something,
Well, performance
it's there.
management is hard
Yeah. Yeah.
all along in the government,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Whether you're, you see poor performers on the career side or the political side, putting somebody on a PIP and performance or performance improvement plan, and then
Right.
managing their performance,
Mhm.
either out the door or whatever. That's hard no matter what. With politicals, what you found is they just shifted them around. It
Right.
wasn't like
That's right.
you were gonna
Yeah. They
put
got
them
a new
out.
appointment. They
Yeah,
all of a sudden got a
exactly.
new appointment. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And then with the, civil servants, it just took forever. And that
Mhm.
is one of the things, a lot of people see with Schedule F
That's
is,
right.
well,
Exactly.
we want the Schedule
Yeah.
F
That's
because
right.
otherwise it takes, bazillion years to,
Right.
performance manage someone out the door.
That's
And
right.
so again, don't let's not throw the baby out with
Yeah.
bathwater. You
Mhm.
gotta find, I think, kind of a sweet spot of what makes sense, in terms of having nonpartisan continuity
Continuity.
and then
Right.
having high performers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I would agree
Exactly.
with you there. And yeah, there was some push pull on expertise. And so I will say that,
Mhm.
right? That when the career civil servant is the one with the expertise and telling you the rules and the regulations and, what the law says, you would find
Yeah.
that could cause a lot of tension with politicals, that you're being obstructionist. I know one
Mhm.
political in the Obama administration had said to me, well, these are your travel rules. Why, Angelique, why are your travel rules like this? I'm like, I did not write the federal travel
Right.
regulations,
Yeah.
and so they would say, are you being an obstructionist because you
Right.
won't let me fly business
Mhm.
class? And it's just
Mhm.
like, no, these are the rules.
Right.
Okay. You're flying for 3 hours. I
Yeah.
can't, I
Right.
can't help you. That's
Yeah.
that's the rule. And so, like I said, regardless
Mhm.
of administration, whether it's Democrat or Republican, you will see that when they come up against rules that they don't like.
Right. 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 Yep. Yep.
You'll see
And
that
you would
first.
see you see some sweeping changes in rulemaking, right, between
Hmm.
administrations and the politicals that would come in, and the first thing you kind of do when you have a new administration is you suspend all the rulemaking for a period of time, right? And rulemaking
Hmm.
is very important, because rulemaking, I hope it's still this way,
Yes,
right? There's a public comment. The
exactly.
American public gets to comment on rules, right?
Hmm.
And this is, one of the reasons why executive orders, right, that
Hmm.
those do not follow a rulemaking process. And how do those all of a sudden become the rule, right?
Hmm.
So I'm sorry, I'm going a little off topic there,
But I feel you.
but
I
it's
feel
yeah.
you on that.
But yeah, yeah, yeah. So certainly, I mean, rules can be flipped upside down, right, between
Hmm.
administrations,
Hmm.
and
But there's
sometimes
also
yeah,
this kind of deregulation, right? Like, in
yeah,
other words, the bureaucracy is using regulations to hinder me
hmm,
from carrying out my political
yeah,
agenda. But that's not accurate either, right?
hmm,
And again, the rules, whether it's rulemaking that gets to ultimate policy or regulation,
hmm,
you know there's a reason why. I'm just not a believer in, let's deregulate everything, let's throw
right,
that out, and then when something bad happens we'll put it back in.
right, yeah,
Most of the rules and the policies regulations that have come to fruition have come
Mhm.
there for a reason. Now, there are some that are straight policy, right, of an
Mhm.
administration where they want to do that. And then there are others where you've gone through the bad things, whether you're testing food,
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
and that type of thing, or you're saying, when you were at NIST, certain things, standards you had to have in place to make sure they work.
Right. Mhm.
I think there, and maybe this is my little rant here, that there is too much negativity around
Mhm.
regulation
Mhm.
and rules. They're there for a reason. And I know we're going to talk to IGs. We're going to start in our
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
segments, starting to have some guests on. And I think, talking about oversight and the IGs
Mhm.
and all of that and what they look at when they're auditing or investigating against rules, I think is important. But let us not, just like we're not
Mhm.
throwing out the bureaucracy or the public
Yeah.
servants or the career people with the bathwater. I think we should be really intentional about looking at what rules make sense, what's
Mhm.
efficient and effective, and then, okay, then like retiring those things that don't make sense. I think
Right.
really is key.
Right.
And both politicals and career
Mhm.
are critical to that kind of a determination.
That's right. That's right. And and again, there's all kinds of rules, right, around um, career civil servants and around ethics and
Yes.
things like that, which are
Mhm.
very relevant and necessary. And that's something we didn't talk about here with regard to the rules. The ethic rules between political appointees and career, but those rules are a little different. But certainly, in one of our
Yeah.
next episodes, I think, like you said, oversight and the
Mhm.
importance of that. And again, that will sort of, I think, allow us to carry on a
Mhm.
conversation between who holds the power, right, or
Mhm.
the authority. Not necessarily,
Mhm.
I don't, influence maybe, but power and authority,
Right.
and where it comes from.
Right. And I would just mention, as you were saying that, the Hatch Act came to mind.
Hmm.
And, it's been talked about a lot with shutdown, as, you saw certain websites that said Democratic led shutdown, or you saw certain things that talked about, the Republican shutdown. And again, career have very strong rules related to the Hatch
Hmm.
Act, as do the politicals, in the sense of they can do much more about saying things politically that career staff cannot and should not.
Right.
And
Right.
so you have to be very, very careful about that, particularly as you go up the ranks. I think the Hatch
Hmm.
Act is even more stringent for senior executive service
Right.
types. And then the only other thing I would mention is pay. We talked about,
Hmm.
career versus the other, versus politicals. We didn't really talk about the pay scheme, but you can see all the pay scales. They're out
Yep.
there. For the most part, I think the politicals were more limited. I know I made less as a political than I did as a career SES member. But for the most part, I personally feel that public servants could be paid more, but that's just my personal feeling, whether you're political or
Hmm.
whether your career, because when you compare the depth and breadth of authority and just what you're responsible for and accountability to the private sector, they're getting paid a whole lot more than your average public servant. We do not
Right.
join the government to
Right. For pay.
become wealthy.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I would
Yeah.
just say that in terms of pay. So don't know if there are other thoughts that you have, Angela. If we've missed anything, if there were any of the other questions on career versus political, but know that again, linking back to our deep state, if there's anything, you'd have to look at all the people that are in government or those close to government, to
Mhm.
see what the influence is.
Yes. Agree. Agree. So, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask of us on this topic or any of our other three episodes, please send us those questions. We're looking forward to seeing them at realpublicservants@gmail.com.
All
And
right.
I think
I
that
think
we'll,
that's
again,
it.
we're going to bring on some guests maybe
Mm-hmm.
in our next few episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we we are watching, and watching the clock toward January 30th, for all of you federal employees that are out there. I'm sure you're watching it as well. So stay strong.
Yes. Stay strong and no more shutdowns.
Yeah.
All right. So, with that, thank you. We're looking forward to our next segments, whether they are, as Angela said, we look into the accountability in our IGs or whether we go more into the foreign policy realm. We're going to start having guests and we're looking forward to that. So, with that, we both say see you next time on The Real Public Servants. Bye bye.
All right. Keep it real. Bye bye.